In August, Joe Biden absolutely botched the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, something many of us had been celebrating as a good move, finally getting out of the region. We shouldn't have been there. But Biden did insane things, or at least his leadership did. Well, under his leadership, his command did, abandoning Bagram Air Force Base, and this precipitated a major decline in Joe Biden's approval rating. Right now, I have a story that is one of the most absurd that I've ever seen from the AP. Biden administration officials are suggesting they are effectively going to cede Ukraine's eastern front to Russia. Now, I suppose that may be a good thing if it means we avoid a ground war. When Russia started building up troops on their western border, the eastern border of Ukraine, there was fear that the U.S. would send boots on the ground or more weapons to Ukraine, sparking a larger conflict. And we don't want that. But even Republicans, a Republican senator out of Mississippi, said boots on the ground on the table, nuclear preemptive strike on the table, all of that bad news. It is bad. So considering we don't want to go to war with Russia, perhaps this is the best thing that Joe Biden can do. It is said that he will tell Ukraine to effectively cede some autonomy to the Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. And this to me is absolutely insane. I was on the ground at the start of this conflict, the Euromaidan movement. I was there for about a month or two, and I got to see a lot of what was going on. It was very different back then. But eventually, this boiled over into what many people were saying may be a civil war in Ukraine. Eventually, however, things kind of simmered down, and people started saying it was just a separatist movement. But that was during the Trump years. Things kind of got quiet. Once Joe Biden gets back in, things start ramping up. Now, here's where it gets absolutely worse. Joe Biden recently waived sanctions on a gas pipeline, the Nordstream 2. And many people were wondering why Biden was effectively giving this up to Russia. While Donald Trump was president, we kept hearing in the media that Putin had compromat on Donald Trump. And what is it, Nancy Pelosi tweeting several times? What could he possibly have on Trump that is allowing Trump to just ignore Russia? Well, now, based on what Joe Biden is doing, it seems more like Putin has compromat on him. Or it may just be that once again, Joe Biden's leadership is a disaster for the United States. Now, I don't know why the U.S. cares all that much about Ukraine. It seems like they care about it more than they should. The bigger threat we face is in the South China Sea. It's Taiwan. It is Vietnamese fishing boats being sunk. It is the militarized atolls from China. It is China sending their fleets along Hawaiian and Alaskan waters. But the media wants you to believe that it's all Russia, Russia, Russia. So maybe it's not the worst thing in the world that Biden's basically walking away from this. But this does have a lot to do with Western power, NATO, and what Russia does represent. Russia is not an ally of the United States. And as Steve Bannon told me, they should be. Instead, the U.S. is pushing them away and leading them to start working with China, which just means if China does rise up, and they are, and it comes to a kinetic war, well, then the U.S. is going to be left holding an empty bag. The U.S. needs allies. It needs allies in Russia. It needs allies in India. But instead, it's floundering. And now we've got China moving into Afghanistan. Joe Biden screwed that up. And it seems like Joe Biden is once again screwing this up. It's bad. At the same time, I can point this out. Yesterday, I covered a story. It was reported that the White House had been secretly meeting with members of the media trying to garner favorable coverage. And lo and behold, now we're starting to get it. Trending on Twitter, the Biden boom, things are better than ever. No, it really feels like Biden is extracting this country and burning it to the ground. And what's happening is that China is rising up and will eventually displace the United States. So congratulations, Americans, you voted for this. Not everybody I know, but some people did. Just like those in big blue cities who keep voting for their own destruction, they do it. So I look at what's happening with a bit of pessimism. I don't think it's all bad. I certainly think come 2024, there can be a major shift, but it's only if people pay attention, wake up, get active in their local elections, get active in the Republican primaries, and get some real leadership in our government. For the time being, this is where we're at. I want to stress before we get started, if what Biden is doing does avoid a war, a ground war, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe this is the best they have. So I don't want to be overly critical because I do not want to see conflict escalate in the region or the U.S. have to enter. But if they're going to cede autonomy to the Russian-backed separatist movements, then Ukraine is basically falling and Biden's basically backing off. Russia should not have the ability to do this. At the same time, I don't know if the United States are if we're the country that should be doing anything at all to try and prevent what's happening in the region. Let's read the news. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member to get access to exclusive members-only segments of all of our shows, including the Timcast IRL podcast. We had Jack Murphy on the other day, Steve Bannon the other day, and we were talking about censorship and what was going on with YouTube and why we do what we do. You definitely want to check that out. As a member, you're helping support my work here with these segments, as well as all of our journalists. We just hired a new journalist. We're going to be hiring more. We've got more boots on the ground. We want to expand. We want to make more good, factual news, real news. And we need your support as a member. So go to timcast.com to become a member. It's the only way to do it. But don't forget to like this video right now, subscribe to this channel, and share the video if you really want to help. Let's read the first story from the Associated Press. NATO, Ukraine autonomy pose diplomatic challenges for Biden. The AP reports, President Joe Biden said this week the U.S. would take a more direct role in diplomacy to address Vladimir Putin's security concerns over Ukraine, part of a broader effort to dissuade the Russian leader from a destabilizing invasion of its western neighbor. But any negotiations to peacefully resolve Europe's tangled East-West rivalries will present minefields for the U.S. president. Biden made his offer of American diplomacy during a 2-hour online session with Putin on Tuesday. He offered joining the Europeans in negotiations not just to settle the conflicts in eastern Ukraine, but to address Putin's larger strategic objections to NATO, expanding its membership and building military capacity ever closer to Russia's borders. Biden spoke by phone Thursday with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, although no details were available immediately after the discussion. Administration officials have suggested that the U.S. will press Ukraine to formally cede a measure of autonomy to eastern Ukrainian lands now controlled by Russian-backed separatists who rose up against Kiev in 2014. An undefined special status for those areas was laid out in an ambiguous European brokered peace deal in 2015, but it's never taken hold. Biden also will have to finesse Ukraine's desire to join NATO. The U.S. and NATO reject Putin's demands. They guarantee Ukraine won't be admitted to the Western military alliance. But senior State Department officials have told Ukraine that NATO membership is unlikely to be approved in the next decade, according to a person familiar with those private talks who spoke on condition of anonymity. I want to stress this point. When I was there on the ground, the reporting I saw, this was late 2013, the reporting that I saw and that was being conveyed to me is that this conflict was basically Russia's fears that if Ukraine joins NATO, Russia now has a NATO nation right on its border. Also, Crimea, Russia's only warm water port. They needed access. They have military operations there. And if Ukraine went to NATO or the European Union, it could threaten their ability to access the Black Sea, go out through the Suez Canal or through the Mediterranean, all of that stuff. I think Suez Canal. Could be getting my geography wrong. So Russia, what do? Start staging on the eastern front of Ukraine, on their western front. Eventually, they move into Crimea. Quote unquote, elections are held, and then the region of Crimea is annexed by Russia, and they say, see, everybody loves this. The U.S., NATO, the EU effectively did nothing. But what can we do? Many people in the United States do not see a reason for us to engage in war over Ukraine. And I have to say, I agree. As much as I don't like what Russia is doing, I don't see how it's any of our business. There's questions, though. We can provide Ukraine, as NATO or the United States, with weapons like Donald Trump did. He sold them weapons. And he said, look, this is your thing. Buy the weapons, do your thing. But Ukraine can't stand a chance against Russia. To be completely honest, Russia's not that big of a threat to us either. They have great hackers, cyber capabilities, but they're a relatively small nation compared to Western powers, NATO countries, the European Union, United States, etc. But this is still bad for Joe Biden. Because across the board, Joe Biden has proven to be a weak and ineffective leader. This didn't happen during Donald Trump's tenure. When Donald Trump had his one term, what did we get? All of this slowed to a halt. I think Vladimir Putin was genuinely concerned. Trump was pulling troops out of the Middle East, and Putin was probably thinking, I'm not gonna engage with this hothead. But the media kept saying Trump was the one who was compromised by Putin. That's insane. Trump was the one who sold the weapons to Ukraine. Apparently, Obama wouldn't do it. Now, Joe Biden is urging, his administration is going to urge Ukraine to cede that territory. And what about Nord Stream 2? Look, I'm not saying that there's actual compromise on Joe Biden. I'm just saying it seems like he's doing a relatively bad job on the surface. I want to stress this. If Russia is adamant on staging a war in Ukraine, and Joe Biden's only option is to tell Ukraine to stave off war, cede autonomy to this region, it's probably the best we can do. Or at the very least, it seems that way. I absolutely do not want to rag on Biden if this is his best option for avoiding ground war. That being said, it's part of a larger trend. And there was no discernible reason why Biden gave up Nord Stream 2, waiving sanctions on Russia. Now he's claiming it's leverage. Let's read a little bit more. They say, for Biden, the challenge will be encouraging Kyiv to accept some of the facts on the ground in eastern Ukraine without appearing to cave to Putin, a perception that could embolden the Russian leader and unleash a fresh line of condemnations by Republicans as Biden's popularity is already in decline. Ukraine may be asked, can you make some step forward on these areas, said Stephen Pfeiffer, a former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. Quote, but I don't see Washington pushing Ukrainians to take steps that would compromise their sovereignty or the ability of the national government when it came to making decisions. The Biden administration has repeatedly stated its unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. They're going to say Ukraine, a former Soviet republic with deep cultural and historic ties to Russia, has in recent years sought closer integration with the West and membership in NATO. The alliance has held out the promise of membership, but has declined to set a timeline. Even before the current crisis, Ukraine was a long way from joining. They go on to mention National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan stressed at a White House briefing after Biden's call with Putin that there was a delivery of defense assistance to Ukraine just very recently, and that will continue. If it is true, and I want to stress, if administration officials have suggested the U.S. will press Ukraine to formally cede a measure of autonomy to eastern Ukrainian lands now controlled by Russian-backed separatists, granting them an undefined special status, this is the U.S. faltering, effectively giving up on the conflict. Russia is building up on the border. There were concerns that Ukraine would not be able to handle what would happen if Russia invades. And if Ukraine now starts pushing back, saying, OK, we're going to give you guys some control, that just means Russia has the ability to move in with influence, not militaristically. Perhaps Biden is just trying to sweep this under the rug. Perhaps he's thinking, look, we don't want troops entering. That will look really bad for me. How about we just cede some of that control already to Russian influence? And they criticize Donald Trump. Take a look at this from the BBC. Nord Stream 2. Biden waives U.S. sanction on Russian pipeline. Critics say the pipeline is a major geopolitical prize for the Kremlin. This is back in May. Why did Biden do this? The Biden administration has waived sanctions on a company building a controversial gas pipeline between Russia and Germany. And there you go. This is the Nord Stream pipeline from Viborg going down. Nord Stream 2 is from Ust-Luga into Greifswald. What's the world reaction? Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Russia and the U.S. has serious differences, but should work together in spheres where interests collide. Okay. So the Biden administration says we're going to waive sanctions on this. Where are we now? Just a couple days ago, New York Post. U.S. says natural gas pipeline is leverage against Russia offensive in Ukraine. Maybe Biden was playing 4D chess. Maybe he said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to set them up. We're going to get them construction on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline so they're invested in it. Then we will have leverage over them because if they try to do anything with Ukraine, we can always say, look how much money you're going to lose if we now interfere with Nord Stream 2 and shut her down. But I think it's an absurd proposition. I can't believe that's true. I think Biden is just screwing this one up. Russia's attitude has to be that Ukraine is substantially more important than one gas pipeline. They've already got the Gazprom pipeline going through Ukraine in the first place. So if they're going to defend a pipeline, they're going to be like, look, we'll take the Eastern Front. We'll take Ukraine. We need it. And we don't want NATO moving closer to our borders. A pipeline's a pipeline. I think it's silly and absurd. And they want to criticize Donald Trump. Trump admin approves new sale of anti-tank weapons to Ukraine. Back October 1st, 2019 was reported. They say the Trump administration first approved the sale of javelins to Ukraine in 2017. Trump immediately started arming these guys. Look, I don't know what's going on, but I can tell you this. When it comes to Ukraine, I don't trust Joe Biden. So if they come out and they say they're telling Ukraine to cede, I do not trust Joe Biden because I investigated in depth. Not like I didn't dedicate a year of my life. I dedicated several weeks covering the story of Joe Biden and Burisma and what he was doing. And he is crooked. He went to the president. Fire the prosecutor, he said. The prosecutor had opened investigations into Mykola Zlochevsky, the founder of Burisma. Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was on the board of Burisma. If Burisma got it, if the Zlochevsky investigation turned up information that implicated Burisma, would have been bad for Hunter. And now we get all the information from the laptop that it's being reported that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden shared bank accounts, or at least one. So Hunter Biden's getting $83 or whatever $1,000 per month. And that money's going into a bank account that what? He shares with his dad. Joe Biden shows up to Ukraine and says, fire the prosecutor, or you're not getting $1 billion or whatever in aid from the U.S. government. Quid pro quo. Now Joe Biden's telling them cede to the Russian-backed separatists? I don't trust this guy. Sorry. I do not trust Joe Biden to be doing the right thing for the Ukrainian people or the American people. Now, Tucker Carlson comes out. I love this. And what did Tucker say? On his show, he said, why do we care more about Ukraine's border than our own border? Tucker's right. You know what? There's a really funny story right now. Doug Ducey in Arizona was giving a press conference on the border crisis. And as he's speaking at a podium with a bunch of press, illegal immigrants walk right through the border and stand there and watch. That's how screwed up our border is. That's why I'm going to say for the third or fourth, whatever time, if Joe Biden's basically like, Ukraine, we ain't helping you. You are not our country. We can't do anything for your border. Maybe you should give up some of this territory, give it some autonomy to the Russian-backed separatists. Okay, maybe we shouldn't be dealing with it. It shouldn't be our problem. Look how the media handles this. Independent. Now, there, a left-leaning source says, Tucker Carlson defends Putin over Ukraine troop movements, saying he just wants to keep his border safe. Quote, at this point, NATO exists primarily to torment Vladimir Putin, who, whatever his many faults, has no intention of invading Western Europe, claims the Fox News host. I don't know if I agree with Tucker that Putin does not want to invade Western Europe. I certainly think it's fair to say, but at least he wants to get close, invading Eastern Europe. So, would Vladimir Putin like full control over Europe? I'd imagine, same way the EU or, NATO would like to have influence over the sphere as well. Does that mean that Putin is actually planning on doing anything as crazy as invading Western Europe? No, probably not. But I'll tell you this. How do you think Russia feels that NATO is encroaching on Ukraine and Eastern Europe? They're probably like, hey, we don't like it. And then what? You're going to make the argument that the West, that NATO and the U.S. doesn't want to invade Eastern Europe? I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Biden did. We have this story from Forbes. Tucker Carlson accused of promoting Russian propaganda as Putin masses forces on Ukraine border. This is silly. It's absolutely silly. I really, really am stressing the point about the decision Biden's making being, I think, just showing his lack of leadership. But I stress this point because I'm not going to pretend like I have better answers. Many of you may have stronger opinions or better answers. Maybe the issue is literally just arming Ukraine to the teeth and saying, look, we'll sell you weapons, do your thing. But I really don't want war. I agree with Tucker. We shouldn't be worried about this. We should be focused on our own border. I just don't believe that Joe Biden has good intentions because of the Burisma scandal. And I especially don't believe Joe Biden will do anything for our own border. I certainly think he's got ulterior motives, especially with waiving the sanctions on the Nordstream 2 pipeline. Now, let me show you where the news is at today. Stop being mean to me, says Daily Mail. White House holds secret meetings with news organizations to demand better publicity for Biden, as Washington Post columnist claims president is being treated worse than Trump. I covered this in greater detail yesterday. It's amazing how this is all basically being proven to just literally be happening. So the Biden administration has private meetings with the press urging positive coverage. And what happens? The media obliges. From the Daily Mail. CNN's Don Lemon is blasted for literally singing Biden's praises over 5-cent drop in gas prices after White House had secret meetings with journalists begging for better press. It's incredible because CNN's the one who exposed this. You ready for the good stuff? Here's the good stuff from The Hill. Biden is delivering the fastest economic recovery in history. Why hasn't anyone noticed? I don't know. Maybe it's because my food prices are way up, gas prices are way up, property prices are way up, and people are struggling. There's more COVID deaths this year than last year. This is what you get. Now, to be fair, it's an opinion piece from The Hill. They say it doesn't reflect their views, but come on, here we go. This op-ed says, Democrats are faced with a sticky problem. The economy is nearing full employment after businesses added 210,000 jobs in November. Those numbers are abysmal. Jeez. Labor force participation climbed to its highest level since the pandemic, and wages are rising across many industries. Yet most voters are increasingly pessimistic about President Biden's economic stewardship. How are they claiming that 210,000 jobs are good? There are, I think, double the amount of job vacancies as there are people looking for work? One of the problems here with that number is that these people can't take any job. Let's say you're a petroleum engineer. You can't go and be a school teacher. So there could be school teacher openings and you can't find work. The economy is fractured and broken. And they want to say, but it's the best. It's the best. Oh, here we go. I love this one. From the Washington Monthly. It's a Biden boom and no one has noticed yet. Amazing. If the current high levels of economic job and income growth continue, the 2022 midterms could look different than most are predicting. What is this, an attempt at a self-fulfilling prophecy? Convince everybody that everything's better than ever, and they'll just go along with it and believe it's true and be like, I guess Biden is good. While many people are uncomfortable communicating bad news, Democrats have a problem these days talking about the good news, especially on the economy. Based on the data, President Biden and the Democratic Congress are set to preside over the strongest two-year performance on growth, jobs, and income in decades, so long as the current cycle of inflation eases. Oh, so long as it eases. Okay. Here's a story from Washington Post. I love the manipulation. In 2022, companies plan to give biggest raises in more than a decade. Higher salaries for new employees will help push payroll costs up an average of 3.9%. Conference Board research shows inflation plays a role. Let me simplify this for you. People can't afford to eat or drive. So when they go to jobs, they say, you've got to pay more than that. That's it. And so the companies are like, I guess so. And that means they're going to have to raise prices across the board. Now, I'm not a big fan of a hard minimum wage. I'm not a fan of necessarily just getting rid of it. I'm not going to pretend like I know the answers to that problem. What I can say is artificially increasing wages doesn't work the way these people think it does. So right now on the left, they're saying just crank up wages. Okay, I'll tell you what happens. They don't want to admit it because they look at places like Denmark and Finland and they're like, they have a $20 minimum wage for their fast food restaurants and a burger only costs $1.80. And they have healthcare and blah, blah, blah. Sure, small countries. I get it. Well, I'll use an anecdote. An anecdote isn't, the plural of anecdote is not data. But I was talking to an accounting firm who said that when New Jersey raised their minimum wage, they lost like 30% or some ridiculous number of their clients because many of these small businesses can't afford it. Driving up the minimum wage may negatively impact Walmart, who can afford it, but it's devastating for small businesses. You know, even Walmart's going to be like, okay, we're going to lose X dollars. But a mom and pop shop where the owners are making like $40,000 a year and their employees are getting paid $12 an hour, all of a sudden I have to pay $3 more per person per hour. All of a sudden they're like, we are no longer able to survive. So what do? They shut down. Where do they go work? I don't know. Maybe they retire or go work for the big box stores. Here's what I find funny. You can certainly find stories in American mainstream press that are negative towards Democrats on the economy and otherwise. It's just funny to see that there are stories popping up now after this Biden push to try and claim the economy was doing well. But what happens when you go to Canada? This one I like. Fortune. This one is from November 30th, apparently before the Biden meetings. Food prices are already at a 10-year high. There's no relief coming in 2022, a grim new report says. Okay, well, that's American press. But what is this? It's a Biden boom? What about the fastest economic recovery? How come only 2 weeks ago they were like, food prices are already at a 10-year high? All right, let's throw it to Canada. From CBC, we'll all be paying a lot more for food next year, says Canada's food price report. 2022 expected to see the biggest annual increase in food bills on record, new report says. We got this one from globalnews.ca. Canadians are about to face more sticker shock at the grocery store. December 9th, 6 a.m. That's this morning. Incredible. So in Canada, they're in serious trouble. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but people are going to be facing sticker shock as prices skyrocket. I suppose the good news is that if the cost of food goes over $950 in San Francisco, it'll stop all the mass looting because then they can finally prosecute these people. No, I'm kidding, by the way. That's not going to happen. But you've got media that's trying to lie to protect Joe Biden. That's the game. It's hard to know what the right moves are going to be in foreign policy. But it is shocking to me to see that Biden's basically just saying like, yo, we out. We got nothing here. We're not gonna even, have any diplomacy. We're just gonna tell Ukraine, back off. Let them have it. Meanwhile, in the United States, more bad leadership. I gotta say, I really don't have all the answers when it comes to foreign policy. Okay, there's just some things I think are absolutely wrong. When it came to Afghanistan, I felt like the U.S. presence there was ridiculous, and we shouldn't have been. It was like remnants of the Cold War. People were like, should we pull our troops out of South Korea too? And I'm like, that's a great question. Yeah, maybe we should. What are the justifications for us being in South Korea? North Korea? All right, well, I like South Korea. It's a very modern place, and a lot of people believed that's what we could do with Afghanistan. The problem is South Korea, the U.S. partnership with South Koreans wasn't, for the most part, I'll say, because I don't know every aspect of history, invasion on false pretexts. There was an actual war. There was the spread of communism, and the U.S. came in to protect the people from the communist expansion, and they were able to preserve South Korea, provide them aid. Now South Korea's got one of the biggest companies in the world, Samsung, and they're doing great. I think Samsung is like the majority of their GDP. It's crazy. Now, with Afghanistan, we invaded because we were looking for some, because of 9/11, we were looking for these terrorists. But then it ended up becoming this weird occupation to try and shape the nation building. And people said, given a long enough period of time, it could turn out to be like South Korea. Maybe it could have been. I don't blame Trump for this. I felt like we shouldn't have been there in the first place, and it was a disaster across the board. The problem is Joe Biden's withdrawal was just botched on purpose. Like they wanted Afghanistan to fall. Abandoning the Air Force Base in the middle of the night, not telling the Afghan army so that looters would just come and smash it up. It's almost like the Biden admin wanted Bagram to fall. And then in turn, the Afghan, national forces, defense forces. It's kind of sad. The Afghan commandos actually tried to defend themselves from the Taliban. But the U.S. gave no advanced warning, didn't give any logistics, just literally was like, we out. Pulled the rug out from under them. It didn't have to be that way. Talking to Kash Patel and Peter Navarro, working in the Trump administration, they had a plan for Afghanistan. They had worked out a great plan. Biden botched the whole thing. And I think that's why his approval rating tanked so much in August, precipitating his long fall. Not to mention the economy, of course, like I said. From Forbes, inflation hits 15%, fossil fuels boom, and a hypersonic Cold War starts. Here are the predictions for 2022. Is that what we can expect? If that's the case, expect to get real bad. November 11th, inflation pushes income tax brackets higher for 2022. There's good news for everybody. Is that what they say? They're like, inflation's actually a good thing. You're in a lower tax bracket now. Great. The cost of cereal just went up 20%, or it's about to. Food is through the roof. Milk, bread, and eggs, that's expensive, but I'm going to save $50 on my taxes. Great. I'll use that money towards 3 days worth of groceries now that it's super expensive. Maybe 3 days is a bit much. We went shopping. We went to the grocery store out here, and it was shocking to me because we had about a third of the cart full, and it was like $700. And we're just buying like basic necessities, like some lunch meat. We were getting like whipped cream and strawberries. We weren't buying 50 bushels or whatever. It's just like a regular amount of food. And I'm like, what is going on, man? I don't know if Trump has all the answers. I can certainly say that American energy independence is extremely important for our economy to make things better. I would not be surprised if Biden is doing this intentionally, and I'll tell you why. Under Donald Trump, we saw a major economic boom. I don't believe that people like Biden want that to happen. I think they want tapered and controlled economic growth. They want us to not be able to grow too fast because they want economic normalization. Now, I'm not going as so far as say there's a grand globalist conspiracy for a one world currency or anything like that, though I'm sure some people fantasize about that and they have power. What I'm saying is that Joe Biden wants to make it easier for corporations to move and make money. A corporation wants to go from the U.S. to China. It's easier if there's economic normalization. Different and better laws, they can make more money. They don't necessarily want to pay more money, so it can't have its detriments. But economic normalization is a good thing. That basically means a unit of currency in the U.S. is more equal to a unit of currency in other countries. So it's easier to exchange things. Faster, I guess. Donald Trump's attitude was, nah, America first. There are a lot of people that believe, and I genuinely think it's true, they want a one world authority. They already exist. There's the International Monetary Fund. There's the SWIFT payment system. There's the UN. There's NATO, etc. So we're already inching that direction. But they're not people who believe in American values. And therein lies the big problem. I, for one, actually would like to see a functioning one world government. I know I can already hear a lot of people who are national saying that's wrong. But hold on. I'm not saying that we would lose our borders. I'm not saying that we would lose our values. I'm saying that we would be like, hey, we have an international court system to prevent war from happening. Like when Russia pulls something like this, every country in the world says it's going to be adjudicated in a courtroom. More importantly, our values, individual liberty, freedom, inalienable rights must persist. We cannot allow foreign countries or corporations to come and intervene and cause those problems. So I'm okay with grand-scale international efforts and a unified authority dealing with international conflict. But internal conflict will be resolved among the people and our rights will be preserved. And more importantly, I think the rights that we have here should be, to a certain degree extended to people in other countries. That is to say, I would prefer to see other countries have similar values to the United States, not the other way around. The problem is the globalists, as they're called, are more about Chinese state communist values. That's the problem. I don't have all the answers, my friends, but I can tell you this. I think Joe Biden is screwing everything up. I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Become a member at timcast.com. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all then.